Welcome, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're connecting from. This is Junaid again, the faculty director at GSU-CIBER in Atlanta, Georgia. Well, these sessions are offered through the cyber network of MSI Cyber Consortium. And for those of you who are connecting for the first time, CYBER stands for Center of International Business Education and Research. And we are hosting one of the 16 such designated centers of excellence at Georgia State University. And we especially a warm welcome to all of the returning attendees, as well as the new ones that are joining us for the very first time. These webinar series were started back in April 2020, right after the pandemic hit. And now we've been ongoing since then, and so far have reached the verge of like 90 webinars. The topics typically cover teaching or research or conversations with business executives, but the common denominator is the topics are always relevant, timely, and related to global and international business. Just a couple of notes before we get started. All of our webinars are recorded, so they would be made available on our YouTube channel a couple days after the session is over. And you can always go back and listen and watch it over as much as you want. Secondly, when you exit, you will receive an email asking for a brief feedback survey with about 5 questions, so it's rather short. And your feedback by responding to that survey would be highly appreciated on our side, because we're also looking for ideas to consider for future webinars. And in terms of the technicalities, everyone except the panelists are muted in the webinar. However, we highly encourage you to ask questions or make comments as the discussion flows that are directed to the speakers. You may use the Q&A function for your questions and your comments. And if you have any queries in regards to the staff, you may use the chat function. And so with that, obviously, let's get started. Today's topic is internationalization of circular business models and related value chain activities. And we got a distinguished speaker who will be joining us for this particular webinar, Dr. Devrim Eskiyerli. Let me briefly introduce her, and then we'll get started with our conversation. Dr. Devrim Eskiyerli is an associate professor at the Research Group Business Innovation at Fons Venlo University of Applied Sciences in the Netherlands. She has her undergraduate degree in economics at Hacettepe University in Turkey, did her MBA at George Washington University, and completed her PhD in political economy at the Middle East Technical University in Turkey. She has worked for about 20 years in various international organizations and government agencies, as well as universities. And in terms of different organizations, she's worked at the World Bank in Washington, D.C., Department of Foreign Trade of Turkey, and Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of Australia before joining Fontys University. So her background covers international trade subsidies, trade policies, a lot of action items in regards to conduct of international trade. Her current research focuses on business model innovation, digital and circular transitions, and AI and sustainability, with particular topics that include exploring the costs and benefits of AI and the internationalization of circular business models. Well, that takes us to the title of this webinar, right? Internationalization of circular business models and related value chains. So with that, as I hand over to Dr. Eskiyerli, I will also start off with a question in that regard, Dr. Eskiyerli. Well, circular business models and internationalization. Well, I believe we're here to explore how do these two intersect. And so I'll let you kick off with the general introduction, framing the issue and pointing to what challenges do businesses face when expanding circular business models internationally. So welcome again, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Circular economy is an economic system based on the reuse and regeneration of materials or products, especially as a means of continuing production in a sustainable and environmentally friendly way. And in this regard, a circular business model is the logic of how a business and an organization creates, delivers, or captures value to its broader range of stakeholders while minimizing ecological and social costs. So circular business model is a business model where a business adopts the circular economy principles. We can define it like that. When you adopt a circular business model, you also involve all of your stakeholders in it. And your stakeholders are rarely only local. They always, almost always, in our experience, also involve international stakeholders. Therefore, when businesses adopt a circular business model and they want to go abroad with their circular business model, they may need to modify certain aspects of it, which creates challenges. So when it comes to what challenges businesses face when expanding circular business models internationally, first of all, it requires managing in a diverse and often challenging environment of different regulatory, logistic, or cultural norms. One primary hurdle is aligning operations with different local environmental regulations. For instance, what we observe is differences in waste management laws, recycling mandates, or product sustainability standards. They differ widely from country to country, and businesses must adopt or change their processes to comply with these requirements in different environments, which also means that businesses may have to make significant investments in understanding local policies and adjusting their supply chain operations accordingly. Therefore, in some markets, for instance, the absence of clear guidelines or absences of enforcement mechanisms for circular practices can lead to operational inefficiency. So this is one challenge that adds to the costs of businesses when they want to take their circular business model internationally. Another challenge that we observe is logistical challenges. For instance, in circular business models, they rely on sophisticated systems for, let's say, reverse logistics, where used products are collected, refurbished, and reintroduced in the market. Establishing such systems in foreign markets can represent a challenge because you need to rely on significant infrastructure development, which may not be always feasible or cost effective in certain regions or certain countries with underdeveloped transportation or recycling networks. So logistical challenges is also an important challenge that the businesses face. Another challenge that they face when they want to take their circular business model international is the cultural differences. Cultural differences also play a significant role in influencing the acceptance of circular business models. In some cases, consumers in new markets may be unfamiliar with or resistant to circular value offerings, such as leasing instead of purchasing may not be an acceptable idea to some of the consumers. So building customer trust and educating them about the benefits of circularity can also be a long-term goal or sometimes a hurdle for the businesses which have circular business models. And it requires targeted marketing efforts. So marketing efforts may also change in other countries if you have a circular business model. Therefore, without an established customer base or awareness of sustainable practices, businesses may struggle to achieve the level of participation necessary for the circular business model to work effectively in the other country. One final challenge that I would like to mention is the standardized quality and sustainability benchmarks across different markets adds complexity. Some regions have well-defined sustainability certifications, while the others may not have well-defined sustainability certifications. And it makes it difficult for businesses to ensure consistency in their operations. And therefore, differences in standardization, in quality and sustainability benchmarks may also make it difficult for businesses to take their circular business model internationally and may require significant adaptations.
Well, thank you very much, Devrim Hocam. This is really fascinating. I mean, the topic is obviously of great interest, the issue related to the UN SDG goals or sustainability initiatives, but making it happen is not that easy, I understand, from the different types of challenges that you've posed. I hear that you mentioned the customers being aware or maybe not willing or maybe not interested in being part of this. What could be a remedy for that? I mean, could businesses kind of incorporate customer co-creation so that they're part of the process in a way? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, indeed, customer co-creation is a very important and powerful approach that allows businesses to customize their value proposition, value offering to local market needs, while also enabling engagement and trust. In the context of circular business models, co-creation can take different forms, from involving customers in the product design to providing customization options for services. So this strategy not only enhances the relevance of companies' offerings to different local environments, but it also deepens the customer loyalty by making them active participants in the value creation. For instance, we are working with companies in the manufacturing industry. I can give an example from that. For instance, we are working with furniture manufacturers. In furniture leasing industry, companies could enable customers to choose from modular components that suit their specific space and style preferences. So by offering customizable designs, businesses can cater to diverse aesthetic or functional needs across different markets. Also, they can ensure that their products can resonate with local tastes, local needs. And this also allows, can contribute to their circular business model. And such customization makes the circular business model more appealing to customers who might otherwise view it as less flexible than traditional ownership models. So co-creation is not just about product or service customization, but it also involves engaging customers in sustainable practices. For instance, companies that we work with use digital platforms to educate consumers about the environmental impact of their choices. And they encourage certain behaviors such as returning policies, returning products for refurbishment or recycling. And interactive features like gamification, rewards for sustainable actions, or personalized sustainability reports also motivate customers to participate actively in circular economy. And one final thing, co-creation also serves as an excellent tool for building brand loyalty. Customers who feel they have a voice in shaping the products or services, if they feel like they have a more choice or more voice in shaping the products or services, they are more likely to develop a strong emotional connection with the brand. This connection is particularly valuable in foreign markets, where establishing trust initially, if you're entering into a country for the first time, it can be challenging. So by involving customers in the development process, businesses can gain insights into the local preferences, but they can also encourage a sense of shared purpose with the customers, therefore making circular business models or circularity initiatives more likely to succeed.
That's great. Those are very valuable insights, Dr. Eskiarli. Thank you for that. I mean, you did underline overall the shared purpose that customers become part of the team, so to speak. So it's not just the business trying to move the products through the value chain, but it's actually pulled through because customers also believe in that. Just one thing to add on as an illustration, for instance, based on my experience in retail, particularly consumer electronics, one of the fastest growing subsegments in the industry, this is good news, is the growth in the refurbished phones in
Yeah.
particular. So that's maybe a good sign or an example, which we hope obviously will be multiplied in other areas as well. Well, I mean, you did mention about the furniture industry, the modular, I mean, involving the customer so that they're also happy of getting something customized or as they like or as they prefer. Well, do you, based on your research, because you're doing a lot of work with businesses, working at an applied science institute, any example of like adaptation of foreign market entry with a circular model that focuses on like how do they enter foreign markets or how should they enter foreign markets?
Um, when they're entering into foreign markets, there's a need for adaptation of the circular business model. In this regard, resource efficiency and sustainability goals also influence how the circular business models approach foreign market entry. So, unlike linear models, circular business models emphasize waste minimization and maximizing resource value, which require businesses to carefully select those markets that align with these principles. For instance, markets with strong environmental policies and consumer awareness about sustainability provide a strong or a natural fit for circular business models. So companies with circular business models tend to choose these markets initially. And such environments reduce the barriers for introducing circular business models. And therefore, both customers and governments are more likely to support initiatives that promote, let's say, activities such as recycling, reuse, or resource conservation. And in this regard, resource efficiency also drives operational decisions by focusing on product designs that prioritize durability, repairability, and recycling. Businesses can then reduce the reliance on virgin natural materials. And they are often subject to price volatility and supply chain disruptions. Therefore, this focus on efficiency not only lowers the cost, but also strengthens the company's resilience, enabling it to manage in complex regulatory environments in foreign markets. For example, in regions with high import duties on raw materials, businesses can utilize resource-efficient designs to avoid that. And therefore, they can minimize costs when also maximizing or maintaining product quality. Also, sustainability goals shape how circular business models position themselves in new markets. And companies often prioritize regions with supportive policy frameworks, such as tax incentives for green initiatives or subsidies for waste management infrastructure, and aligning with global sustainability standards and certifications also enhance credibility, which makes for market entry easier with established partnerships. And also, I would like to mention that sustainability goals influence customer engagement strategies, as we have just briefly discussed. Circular business models require active customer participation in practices such as product returns or recycling. And therefore, to succeed in foreign markets, businesses must invest in awareness campaigns and partnership with local organizations to educate customers about these practices. Therefore, countries, regions highlighting the economic and environmental benefits of circularity stand out for these businesses as the countries to enter into with their circular business models.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you for that. Well, there's another angle that is reminded to us by one of our attendees who has two questions actually, but I want to connect to one of them. And that's the role of government incentives on all this. We know you did touch upon the fact that the legal differences or the benchmarks or the regulations may be a challenge or create challenges for companies interested in circular business models, and different countries may have different legislation basically to do that. But there are also reward systems or incentives, again,
Mhm.
defined and offered through governmental institutions. And we do see that, I mean, there are differences in terms of like charging for the grocery bag that you use, or not charging for the grocery bag. Things as simple as daily, as such things may have impacts defined by the government. So the question of our attendee is, what about the role of government incentives of internationalization of businesses with circular business models?
Government intensive in circular practices obviously encourages businesses to enter into countries where there are such established incentives. Where the circularity behavior is incentivized by the governments on either on the consumer side or on the production side, businesses see it as a facilitator to take their business model internationally, because without the established rules, regulations, or incentives, it becomes an additional investment cost for them, even if the other criteria are more quite attractive to enter into those markets. Without government incentives or a suitable regulatory environment, it can serve as a cost for them. So where there are incentives from the governments, it acts as a facilitator to introduce your circular business model abroad.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, selecting which market to enter is one of the key decisions that businesses always make when they internationalize. And there are different criteria that we always talk about. But with these recent developments and the sensitivities about the issues you're underlining, obviously add on new variables to consider in market selection, or in trying to decide which one is better than the other or more suitable than the other. Another question coming from the audience is related to this, points to tariffs. If tariffs become like higher barriers, do you think would that be a factor as well in economic attractiveness of circular business models?
I think if the tariffs are increased, it will be a barrier for all types of businesses, not only on circular business models. Circular business models, in their nature, are quite complex. They are not easy to establish in the first place. And when they are taken abroad, it requires additional customizations and adaptations. And on top of it, when additional tariffs are added, it may become quite costly. We see the circular business models as models which requires an initial high level of investment, which is a cost, but later on, through reusing, recycling, refurbishing practices, these practices pay off the initial costs that are made. So there is a give and take between the initial costs that you make and the final gains that you have. But still, entering into another market with initial high costs, adaptation costs added to it, the higher tariffs, is going to be a detriment, I believe, in taking your circular business model abroad.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So tariffs is an important, I mean, factor in trade, as we all know it. You mentioned about, I mean, your explanation basically relates to the fact that this circular business models are really creating a return on investment in the long term, that it's not like a short term thing, that you need to be committed and it's ongoing, and you tied it to the financial aspect, which actually ties to another question from the audience, who's basically asking what would be a comparable financial comparison or financial data between circular models and non-circular or linear models. That is there any benefit or is there any reward at the end of the road for businesses that take on this challenge? Do you have any research on that, or any findings, or any instances, anecdotes you might want to share with us?
There's continuing research on the return on investment of the circular business models. As I said initially, it requires a higher level of investment into these kind of practices, which are different than the linear practices. But in the end, it is expected to pay off by using and reusing resources. You can recirculate certain materials sometimes endlessly in the production process. So these kind of practices are expected to reduce your costs in the end. But of course, these are not always easy to do. In the Netherlands, also not only in the Netherlands but in Europe, through, for instance, corporate social responsibility directives, these kind of sustainable business models, circular business models, are encouraged or even mandated for the companies to adopt. The big companies are under the scrutiny of corporate social responsibility directives, which immediately affects their whole network, their suppliers, for instance. When the big companies are required to adopt these practices, they immediately pass it on to their suppliers. So as an overall effect, their suppliers also need to adopt circularity and sustainability practices. So through this, the whole system enters into it, although it may be costly, but thinking that the final benefits, at least environmental benefits, will pay off, companies are adopting these practices more and more, despite their costs.
Great. Well, I think that would be your late remarks. They make a good bridge to a topic that I wanted to go into a bit deeper, because now we talked about the businesses and the customers at the other end, consumers at the other end. But when we talk about the value chain, obviously there are other stakeholders and other partners along the way. And you've been making reference to using suppliers and suppliers from different countries as well, and that they are part of the whole value creation process. So with that, could you please expand on why integrating circular supplier criteria, selection criteria, would be crucial? How should we be selecting circular suppliers that would complement and be aligned with this whole process to be in effect?
In the value chain of a company, there are a lot of different stakeholders and actors. So when designing a circular business model, you also need to have suppliers that adopt these principles as well. So integrating circular supplier selection criteria is important for firms aiming for sustainable international expansion, and as they ensure the alignment of supply chains with environmental and operational goals. Circular supplier criteria typically include the use of eco-friendly materials, adherence to closed-loop processes, and compliance with international environmental certifications, such as ISO 14001. These criteria help companies maintain their commitment to sustainability regardless of geographical location, therefore creating a uniform standard that supports global operations. And one of the key benefits of such integrating circular suppliers, has also to do with regulatory compliance. Environmental laws and sustainability standards vary widely across different markets. And by working with suppliers that already meet high sustainability standards, companies can ensure smoother compliance with local regulations. Therefore, this is, in my view, preemptive alignment, and this not only reduces the risk of penalties or delays, but also minimizes the need for costly adjustments to meet specific market requirements. So this is also a place where some cost savings or avoidance of risks can be realized. Additionally, circular supplier selection criteria contributes to operational resilience. Suppliers who use recycled or renewable materials and have good circular practices are better equipped, prepared to handle resource shortages and regulatory changes. And this resilience is crucial in international markets where supply chains are sometimes or often exposed to greater uncertainties. For example, a supplier that emphasizes material recovery can help mitigate risks associated with raw material price volatility and ensures a more stable and cost-effective supply chain. One other aspect that I would like to mention is the brand reputation. Consumers in international markets prioritize sustainable products and practices. So partnering with suppliers which follow circular practices also enables companies to position themselves as environmentally responsible, which adds to their brand reputation. And this differentiation not only attracts, let's say, eco-conscious customers, but also strengthens relationships with the stakeholders, such as investors, regulators, who value and prioritize sustainability. And one final remark here is integrating circular supplier criteria also encourages innovation and collaboration. Suppliers committed to circularity are often more willing to engage in joint efforts to improve processes, develop raw materials, or enhance product designs. Therefore, such partnerships drive continuous improvement and innovation, which gives the companies a competitive edge in international markets.
Perfect. That's fascinating. That's absolutely fascinating. We got a number of questions piling up in the Q&A, which I'm seeing, but not to disrupt your flow, because that was a fantastic framework that you just shared with us. Is there any case study that you've done or come across that utilizes circular supplier selection to support international sustainability goals?
Yes, we are working very often with businesses in the Netherlands, and we are currently working with the manufacturing industry quite often. And a case, I can give an example from a Dutch manufacturing company known for with its commitment to sustainability and circularity. And as part of their international expansion strategy, the company adopted a very rigorous circular supplier selection framework. And this framework emphasized sourcing from suppliers that utilize recycled materials. And which held environmental certifications and implemented closed-loop systems in their operations. And in this regard, one of the key challenges the company faced was ensuring that these criteria were met consistently across multiple regions with varying levels of infrastructure and regulatory standards. Therefore, to address this, the company conducted audits of potential suppliers. They checked out which suppliers could follow these criteria, and they assessed their practices against a set of predefined benchmarks. These audits included evaluation of suppliers' ability to provide secondary raw materials, their compliance with circularity or circular economy standards, and their commitment to eco-friendly practices such as sustainable packaging or transportation. And then by implementing or establishing these criteria, the company then ensured that their international operations also aligned with these sustainability goals. And this approach enabled compliance with diverse regulatory frameworks, but also it enhanced their reputation as a leader in sustainable manufacturing. Therefore, the company used its partnerships with suppliers to co-develop innovative solutions and to expand their circular business model all throughout their stakeholders. And in co-developing innovative solutions such as biodegradable materials in packaging and incorporating advanced recycling technologies. They also involved their suppliers in it. And in the end, the impact of this strategy was quite significant. The company maintained consistency in sustainability practices across borders, and they also strengthened their relationship with the local holders, including regulators and customers abroad. And they demonstrated a clear commitment to circularity, and the company attracted ecologically conscious customers, and they gained a competitive edge in foreign markets.
It's a fantastic example, basically. I mean, which clearly shows it's doable. I mean,
Yes,
if you put your head into it, if you commit yourself, it's not something conceptual, it's something real, with real results and with real businesses growing and becoming more competitive. So that's great. I hope we'll be hearing more and more of these success stories, basically to justify over and over that these initiatives are actually valuable and they do produce results that businesses like. You in your description, you talked about. I mean, in the example you just gave, they were interested in making sure that they had a closed loop with the suppliers, that everyone was working along the same lines. Well, one alternative of creating a closed loop may come from integration, and that's actually one of the questions coming from the audience to this webinar, who's asking. Would the pros and cons of vertical integration apply to circular business models? So that, I mean, they become part of the company, so it's a closed loop by definition. Or would dynamics of horizontal integration also apply? What would be your thoughts on that?
in vertical integration is, of course, makes it easier, maybe in a way, to involve everyone internally, but it is not always possible. So in the cases that we are working on, horizontal integration is seen as a more, let's say, feasible approach. So vertical integration, sharing your knowledges, practices with others, but internally, is good but not feasible. Therefore, in the cases that we study, we observe more of a horizontal integration in circular business model practices.
So like-minded companies coming together in the same
Yes.
at the same stage in the value chain. All right, that's very informative. I want to follow up with another question from the audience, where the question is, which foreign market entry strategies are most popular among companies with a circular business model? So does it work for FDI or any other entry modes, as well as like exporting?
I can give example from the cases that I am working on. We are working on cases where international joint ventures are adopted. So companies who have formulated a certain level or certain type of circular business model want to enter into foreign markets through international joint ventures and want to use their knowledge developed in this field with other partners through licensing methods or franchising methods. So this is one example that we are seeing. Here, the knowledge management model or knowledge management strategies are also becoming important. So the practices that or the knowledge that you have developed when you have built your circular business model is being shared by international partners that come parties in an international joint venture. And by doing this, you share, a property, an intellectual property with partners, and you're also taking them on board in circularity efforts. Therefore, the impact of circularity is also spread, let's say, globally. But as I said, the examples that I have seen is mainly based on international joint ventures or partnerships, where the knowledge developed about circular business models is shared through partnership agreements or franchising or licensing agreements.
Okay, thank you for your response to that. Well, in your earlier again example and reflection, you talked about the horizontal integration being more popular, and you mentioned knowledge transfer or knowledge sharing.
Mhm.
So maybe we should jump into a topic like knowledge management, in sustaining a competitive advantage across borders. So within that concept of knowledge management, how would that contribute to sustaining a competitive advantage, particularly for circular business models? Could you elaborate on that, please?
Sure. Knowledge management is an important cornerstone of competitive advantage, obviously, and this holds true also for circular business models operating in international markets. By systematically capturing, sharing, applying knowledge, companies can ensure consistent performance and innovation across diverse regions, and they manage the complexity of global operations effectively. So a good knowledge management model, a good knowledge management model of circular economy is very important if you have operations internationally. And one critical area where knowledge management adds value is, of course, again, I'll come back to this topic, is the regulatory compliance and adaptation. International markets often present different environmental regulations and standards. Therefore, through effective knowledge management practices, companies can gather insights from early market entrants, regulatory bodies, and local partners, using this information to streamline compliance processes. This knowledge transfer enables businesses to avoid costly mistakes and adapt their circular practices align with local policies. So knowledge management in that regard for circular business models or companies with circular business models becomes very important. And knowledge management also supports the development of a learning organization, which is essential for innovation and resilience in circular business models. Circularity inherently requires ongoing improvement, whether in product design or material recovery processes or customer engagement strategies. It requires an ongoing improvement process. And therefore, by encouraging a culture of continuous learning, knowledge management ensures that the best practices and innovative ideas are shared across the organization. And this enables them to replicate success stories and spreads the knowledge to all throughout the organization and also across the borders efficiently. Another area where knowledge management is important is, of course, towards the cultural adaptation. Circular business models often depend on customer participation in practices such as recycling or leasing. Therefore, by utilizing knowledge management systems, companies can collect and analyze data on consumer behavior and their preferences in different regions so that they can customize their business models also in international markets to fit to local norms. For instance, knowledge management tools can provide insights into effective communication campaigns, helping businesses educate and engage customers in new markets. One final point that I would like to mention about knowledge management, knowledge management also drives collaboration and synergy within the global supply chains. And what does it mean for circular business models? For circular business model partnerships with suppliers and other stakeholders is crucial for achieving sustainability goals. Knowledge management facilitates the sharing of critical information such as material innovation, process efficiencies, etc., to ensure that all parties are aligned in their efforts. And this collaboration enhances operational efficiency, and it also strengthens, again, the global competitive position of the company.
Well, one of our attendees is commenting that he or she is thinking that it can be dependent on culture of the host country as well.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Since we are working in Europe and in the Netherlands, we are speaking maybe with the voice of that. Circular practices, sustainability practices are quite common and well developed here. I'm speaking with that voice, but of course, the cultural practices of the home and the host country are quite important.
That's why it's an exciting challenge, to spread it
That's right.
around the globe, around the
Yes.
globe. All right. Well, I mean, in reference to your ongoing research of joint ventures, you mentioned about that, of working with companies and tying it to the knowledge management issue. What kind of challenges would you have in managing knowledge across international joint ventures that are
Mhm.
related to the topics of circularity?
Circular businesses face several significant challenges in managing across international joint ventures. Again, these have to do with cultural norms, regulatory environments, organizational priorities, and also to the inherently complex nature of the circular business models. Again, if I am to start with cultural differences, international joint ventures involve partners from diverse cultural backgrounds, and each of them may have unique attitudes towards knowledge sharing, collaboration, and towards sustainability practices. For instance, what one partner considers as a best practice in material recovery may not resonate with another one due to different market context or business priorities. These cultural disparities can hinder the transfer of critical knowledge. It can slow down decision making and create misunderstandings that companies or that compromises the efficacy of circular practices. On the other hand, again, if I can refer to the regulatory discrepancies, it can complicate knowledge management. Each country has its own set of environmental laws, standards, incentives, which affect how circular business models are implemented in an environment or in a country which is more conducive to these practices, where regulations, rules, laws support circularity practices. The operations circular business models can work more effectively. But when the international joint ventures are involved, the regulations in different environments can create a complexity also for knowledge management. So for international joint ventures, aligning these regulations with the knowledge shared across partners can be challenging. Particularly when one partner operates in a region with more lenient or inconsistent regulatory frameworks. These differences often require businesses to develop localized solutions, and it can sort of dilute the scalability and efficiency of circular strategies. And the complexity of implicit versus explicit knowledge, or tacit versus explicit knowledge, can also create a barrier. Tacit knowledge, skills, experiences, insights that are difficult to formulate or codify often plays a critical role in implementing circular practices. For instance, optimizing recycling processes or designing closed-loop systems. In international joint ventures, effectively transferring this type of knowledge, tacit knowledge, across organizational and geographical boundaries require very structured, very well formulated mechanisms, such as workshops, on-site visits, or mentorship programs. So this can also create a barrier. Technological disparities can also, differences in technological levels can also create a barrier to knowledge management.
Well, one of our attendees is suggesting another one. And as a question, posing it as a question, which is, can knowledge hiding be one of the challenges between them? Can partners be keeping or wanting to keep the knowledge to themselves more and more? Or
Of
is
course,
that more cultural? I don't know. What's your take on that?
if you want to use your circular business model abroad, I think you would like to share it with international joint venture partners. But the development of knowledge of circularity practices or your circular business model, as I said, requires initially a significant investment, and the companies may not want to distribute it for free. So they will want to either share it through certain partnership agreements or at a price or licensing agreements. So hiding, of course, can become an issue if these partnership agreements do not exist, because it's a costly initial investment.
Well, it's definitely an investment with the payback for the company. I mean, following these practices. But I also hear that the knowledge itself is of value that can be monetized on its own as an asset. So that's like that's another opportunity. Do you have any specific cases you would remember out of those businesses you've been working with in terms of this management of knowledge? Because you clearly identified like 6, 7 different challenges, each of which is obviously of importance. Do you have any specific case that you may share with us?
Of course, I can again give an example from the manufacturing industry, which wanted to get involved in international joint ventures and therefore wanted to formulate a knowledge management system, which we call circular knowledge management model later on, to share the knowledge that they have built locally with their international partners. And this was, again, a company from the manufacturing industry. They wanted to expand into international markets through an international joint venture with local partners in Southeast Asia. And this partnership aimed to scale their circular business model while managing challenges related to cultural adaptation, regulatory environment, compliance, and knowledge transfer. One of the key challenges was ensuring that the local partner understood and implemented the company's advanced circular practices, such as material recovery, implementing closed-loop systems, etc. And to address this, the company introduced circular knowledge management model designed together with our university, of course, which provide the structured framework for knowledge sharing. And this framework involves several components, including digital tools for tracking material flows, regular cross-border training sessions, and shared knowledge repository accessible for both partners. Cultural differences initially posed a barrier. For instance, the local partner was less familiar with the concept of using recycled material as a premium offering. Bridge this gap, we organized workshops, the company organized workshops to educate the partners team on economic and environmental benefits of circularity using case studies and success stories from their home market. And these workshops built technical expertise, but also created a shared commitment to partnerships' sustainability goals. Regulatory alignment also presented another challenge, as the South Asian market had different standards for waste management and product safety. In this case, the company worked closely with local legal experts and government agencies to adapt its processes to meet local requirements. Therefore, simultaneously, this circular knowledge management model facilitated the exchange of regulatory insights, which ensured both partners could manage these compliance differences effectively. The knowledge management model, of course, had different levels, but these are some of the ones that I can mention here. But it was challenging to build and develop the knowledge here and to share it with international partners was a challenge, but building and implementing a good, well-formulated knowledge management model, circular knowledge management model, certainly helped mitigate these challenges.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Eschiarli. Well, I mean, what I understand is that from your examples and descriptions, that the relationship along the value chain among the players in the value chain is of critical importance. If we look at it that way, how do you think, based on your experience and research, channel power has an impact on these? Like, who has the power? The supplier, the business owner, the end customer, and everything. Because this came to my mind because I remember about more or less 15 years ago in the U.S., Walmart basically mandated all of its suppliers to be sending their goods to the warehouses in crates, each of which had a RFID.
Mhm,
RFID tagged plates. This was mandated by
mhm,
Walmart, and they gave about, I think, 8 or 9 months of lead time for the
mhm.
suppliers to go by. And suppliers are like Procter and Gamble. I mean, like those big companies, that
Yes.
in the FMCG area, and they all had to do it. So, how does would this play out in the international area as businesses are trying to convince or work together with partners from other areas, be it a supplier or a customer? Have you come across anything like this, or would that be worthy of any investigation?
Who has the power is an important question. I think, as also the notion of circularity implies, this is an effort, circular effort. So it needs to involve all parties. Where there's a leak or lower commitment in one area, the whole model, circularity model,
Mhm.
doesn't work.
That's
But the company who is building and developing this model or has the biggest commitment to circularity, let's say the main company, is the leader pulling the cart, we can put it like that. They need to ensure that the commitment is spread all throughout the value chain into all stakeholders. On the one hand, they can work together and stimulate the consumers. On the other hand, the suppliers should also be in the loop. But I think the main power player is the company in the lead, company itself. And when they take this effort internationally, again, this whole model needs to repeat itself also internationally with international partners. But the company in the lead, I think, has the main company, let's say, has the biggest power, but also the biggest responsibility.
Yeah, yeah. Great, great. Thank you for your reflection. So it is. I mean, I made note of that. It works as a whole. It's
It
not
works as
just
a
one
whole.
party. It's circular by itself. The relationships should be circular. I think that's a nice takeaway out of all this. And we have the business, we have the suppliers and the customer, and maybe the fourth leg, just reflecting on your earlier comments, is the government.
Of course.
That's like, what kind of a playing field does the government or government do the governments provide for businesses to be involved in these kinds of initiatives? Okay, this has been fascinating, and we're coming close to our closure. So, and if there are any other questions from the audience, please just jump in, put it on Q&A. But you've been very productive in your questions that enriched our discussion. But thank you so much, Dr. Eschiarli, for your time and for sharing your know-how, your research, your insights with us. So I would like to ask you some final comments in regards to key messages or key sharings that you'd like to have with us.
Thank you. First of all, it is my pleasure to have you here today. Maybe if we can share some key takeaways from this session. I think one of them is strategic adaptation for market-specific needs is quite important, and successful internationalization for both digital and circular business models requires strategic adaptation to the regulatory, cultural, and customer-specific needs of each market. This is important. And secondly, importance of knowledge sharing and local partnerships. Effective knowledge management and collaboration with local partners is really crucial for transferring best practices and circular principles across borders. Therefore, a good, well-developed knowledge management system becomes very important. And one other takeaway from this could be ecocentric supply chains can be seen as a competitive advantage. So these kind of business models, sustainability goals also create a competitive advantage for businesses in international markets.
Well, thank you very much. It's been very enlightening on a very interesting and impactful topic. And coming from your practice from Netherlands for working with real companies, that I think shed a lot of light into how these things can be done, should be done, and that to also to illustrate that they can be done if certain steps and certain challenges are tackled in the appropriate way. So thank you very much again for joining us, Dr. Eskierli, for sharing your know-how with us. And thanks to everyone who's attended this webinar. Please look forward to our other webinars in the next year, because this particular one was the last one within 2024. And with that, our best regards to all of you all around the world, and happy holidays, happy new year. And we hope to see you back next year in our next webinar. Follow us on our web sites or through our LinkedIn posts. Thank you very much.